Next month, we'll be getting our first look at what's next for Grand Theft Auto. They haven't said it's Grand Theft Auto 6 in those words, but they did tell us on Twitter that we can expect the first trailer in early December. When those tweets were dropped, which would have been around a week ago as of making this video, I didn't realise that people found it interesting they didn't outright call it Grand Theft Auto 6, and that maybe it might not actually be the 6th main installment, but it's quite clear that it's going to be something quite big for the brand, and considering the largely unrelated nature of every story in the franchise thus far, I think it's fair to say the talking point is relatively impotent and at best a semantics debate. But we do know some things about this game in development, courtesy of some rumours, so Rockstar are either going to be announcing whatever that was, or they'll blindside us with something quite funny like a remaster of Grand Theft Auto 4. But they are generating consumer interest here, and that directly translates to money, so surely they wouldn't play with that. So with that foolish optimism in mind, which has honestly gotten a little bit lost in the anticipation of games, understandably, I thought I'd do a video talking about the things that I'd like to see in the next Grand Theft Auto. I will keep the points quite broad. I'm not too asked about specific things, nor do I really want to divulge any information that we may already know about courtesy of leaks. Instead, I want to talk about core aspects based on previous Rockstar games and ways I can see them being enhanced. In other words, it's the things that I would hope for to make the game the perfect game for me, but not necessarily for you. So, please use the comment section if you disagree or wish to add more, but besides that, let's get going. Now, it's very clear that one of my favourite games, even though I've played it to death over the past 5 years since its release, is Red Dead Redemption 2. Since you're watching this video, it probably hasn't escaped your notice that that is a Rockstar game, and though it's vastly different in many obvious ways to Grand Theft Auto, it's the latest benchmark for what Rockstar can be capable of. But perhaps what both these Rockstar franchises have most in common are actually the areas that could have done with improvement. Outside of dodgy remasters and things, Rockstar Games releases typically aren't events that don't come with things to write home about, and their games do share an awful lot of similarities. And yet despite being similar in many ways, Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto are entirely different games. They contain entirely different settings, contexts. They differ in tone, atmosphere, and intent. They take very similar approaches to structuring, but those similarities are then taken in entirely different directions to deliver the intended experience. And those experiences ordinarily amount to something of quality. But a flaw I've seen constantly brought up with Rockstar games is the overall approach to mission structure. Over the years, these games have increasingly thrived on their well-executed and intricately detailed open worlds full of possibility, and there are sandbox aspects that allow you to inject your creativity into what's occurring. But I think it's safe to say that as time has gone on, the mission structuring hasn't actually kept up with that. I wouldn't say it's inherently bad. The storytelling is good, it conveys the point well, it can be concise, and it can also be fun. But it is quite limiting when compared to the rest of the gameplay available. Red Dead Redemption 2 slotted in some surface level choices to give you different branches of the same roundabout mission, but largely you have to do what the game tells you, and if you deviate you're liable to fail. It's not the first thing I look to criticise in a narrative experience like Red Dead Redemption 2 for example, where I'm so enveloped in the storytelling that I honestly don't mind feeling like a passenger, at least in the main story, and it did provide variety and choices in an attempt to freshen things up. And there needs to be a clear track of what's going on as well, so it isn't an incompetent system, quite the opposite in fact, but it can feel quite disconnected to the freedom of choice demonstrated in every other facet in the game, when taking 2 steps in the wrong direction can fail a story mission. What I mean is, if you have to do things in a very specific way, like you often have to do in Red Dead Redemption 2 and many Rockstar games before it, what is occurring in your playthrough that is any different to anybody else's? So from a perspective of philosophical bullshit, can you really quantify that as gameplay? Sure, you're making inputs, but only because the game told you exactly what to do and when. And before we miss the point, linear mission design is not inherently incompatible with open worlds full of these possibilities and sandbox elements and all sorts. I think the issue stems from the games doing a lot of the thinking for the player. For example, in Red Dead Redemption 2 you find yourself in close quarters, fast-paced situations quite a fair bit in the story, and often you'll automatically enter Deadeye regardless of whether or not you thought to do that. It is the correct answer, but it's been provided for you. As a result, any possibility for challenge gets scraped away. When you're in the open world, the game simply isn't scripted to make you do specific things at specific times, and as a result there's room for you thinking and responding how you would. It is easily forgiven in my mind when you realise Red Dead Redemption 2 is intended to be a deep narrative experience, on which point it delivers to the highest degree. And I don't think Rockstar are on the wrong track with it as such, because the more linear storytelling actually suits, if not aids, a lot of the narrative beats. But I do feel at times as if I'm sleepwalking through the main story mission's gameplay. And going forward into Grand Theft Auto 6, there should definitely be more room for player input. Not that the absence of it in scripted linear story missions within that world space detracts from the overall experience of the average Rockstar game in my opinion, as no game can be perfect because it's always sacrificing something to prioritise something else. Red Dead Redemption 2 makes it clear that Rockstar are gradually assimilating decisions into the integrity of the narrative, and I don't think it would go amiss for Grand Theft Auto 6 to take that and do more with it to provide a more fresh feeling mission structure. And though I wouldn't lose sleep over it either way personally, it would be a nice thing to have. Moving on, one thing I'd like to see carry over from Red Dead Redemption 2 into this next Grand Theft Auto game is the depth of the environment. Red Dead Redemption 2 really sparked my love for not just Easter eggs but deep mysteries in games. I enjoy something completely irrelevant to the story being told, perhaps being present for reasons that only confuse you, and then giving you enough information to piece at least a good idea of what this thing might be about together. I think there's a very clear path of how they came to exist in Rockstar games, as from Grand Theft Auto to Red Dead Redemption, the universes are wacky, weird and strange for many reasons, giving the games room to actually play around with this stuff and leave loads of things open to interpretation. And I think that stemmed largely from players looking for stuff like that even before it was there. When Grand Theft Auto 4 released, there were certainly urban myths, if you will, about that game that had no basis in the reality of that game, but people said they were there. I think it was the Rat Man or something. Think school kids talking about finding Herobrine in Minecraft, but then assigned that logic to a much younger audience. I am of course joking. And then in San Andreas there was a myth that you could encounter Bigfoot, one Rockstar seemingly liked so much that they found a way to slot in a little nod to it in Grand Theft Auto 5, which is set in the same rough area. The first Red Dead Redemption had its fair share of creepy stuff and there were myths on top, and Grand Theft Auto 5 had its fair share of actual things you could find in the world that were somewhat disquieting and thought-provoking in the sense that there were mysteries to uncover. Red Dead Redemption 2 went mad for that aspect of environmental storytelling, but not at the expense of other content within the open world, and I absolutely love it. So in this next Grand Theft Auto game, I'd like to see more of that. Not all of them, or even most of them, need to relate to something creepy, mysterious, supernatural, or anything like that. They just need to tell stories using nothing but what you can find in the environment without prompt. To me, unpacking a story in that order is incredibly satisfying, as this kind of content enriches the lore of the universe it's in, whilst also feeling like a treat because it's under so many other layers of more expected side content. And when you use these stories to draw connections between two otherwise entirely unrelated locations, the world starts to feel quite lived in. And on top of that, Rockstar would be giving the people what they want. More fishy content. Environmental richness is core to these games at this point. I think this one's going to be a given, but it is the thing I love most about Rockstar single player experiences, and based on the games that I have played, it appears to have only ramped up. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's just become easier to find, but the point is, give it to me. If anything, I'd like to see the environmental storytelling that Rockstar Games has done with some of their past entries go further in the next Grand Theft Auto game. I have no idea how they would, but I suppose we'll see if they manage. I'm sure they could do further world interaction in other ways too. Perhaps in that instance more interiors providing more verticality wouldn't go too far amiss. Maybe on top find a way to provide more interactions with NPCs. I don't think they should go the greet antagonise system that Red Dead Redemption 2 had, because that was there to feed the honour system. It was entertaining, don't get me wrong, but Grand Theft Auto really doesn't need an honour system, so I don't know what rewards you could give for that behaviour instead. It would be cool to see some more depth when being chased by the authorities too, so maybe the police in a certain area remember your specific vehicle after you escaped, or they remember your face for a while after you've done something naughty, which means that you need to leave the area completely and come back later. I'm sure it would get annoying if you constantly cocked up though, but I want to stop talking out my arse now. I only really had bullet points for this video, I didn't really script it. The main thing I want to see from this next Grand Theft Auto, whether it's named Grand Theft Auto 6 or it has some mad subtitle, is a fully current generation experience. Now, thankfully we've got to a point now where a lot of games are releasing only on the current generation, but it got up to a point where it was starting to look a little bit concerning. So there were lots of games still releasing on the last gen. Now I'd imagine this game is a few years out, and it will probably make less sense to be a point of concern then than it does now, and it isn't really a point of concern now. The only reason I bring it up is Rockstar games are many things. Do they keep in track with the rest of the games industry and the times at large? They just sort of do their own thing for the most part, and that has negatives and positives, but I'm imagining following the announcement this game will still be a good 2 years out, if not the best part of 2 years out, and there might be a couple delays in there, who knows. But I'd honestly like to see what Rockstar can do with the power of the current generation at their disposal without the limitations of the last one. Moving on to my final point of the day, the online aspect. I just want to say I don't really care for online that much. I'm more of a single player man, so I never bothered with Grand Theft Auto Online, and Red Dead Online I played sparingly when my mates were about, but I honestly wasn't too fussed about it being a dumpster fire. I still held the single player of Red Dead Redemption 2 in extremely high regard, and still do. Don't get me wrong, I acknowledge that Red Dead Online is an utter travesty, but if you clicked on this video hoping to hear some thoughts on how the online should proceed, I'm sorry to say I have nothing to offer there. And that brings us nicely to the end of my video, in which I give some vague thoughts on what I'd like to see from the next Grand Theft Auto, over the top of some random Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto footage, specifically Red Dead Redemption 2 and Grand Theft Auto 4. Why? Because those are the only two Rockstar games I currently have footage for on my PC. And I only have the GTA 4 footage because I'm currently in the process of streaming a playthrough of that game here on YouTube. Come along. It's fun. So if you see me live with that anytime in the near future, you know what? Come by and say hi. And yes, I do read my chat, otherwise what's the point in streaming? Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I'd like to thank you for sticking with my scrambled egg of a brain until the end. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like on this video, maybe hit subscribe if you want to, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff would be massively appreciated, of course. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care and goodbye.